Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron and special guest today, Jay Christian. What's up, guys?
Chilling. It's a rainy day, but it's always a beautiful day for NBA playoff basketball.
Same here. Sunny in Seattle, man. So let's get it going.
Yeah, it's a recovery day for a lot of people. Cinco de Mayo yesterday. I'm sure a lot of you will be listening to the pod, sitting on your couch, getting ready for some basketball. We're going to touch on every series today. Before we get started, though, just a reminder, you can listen to the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Block Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and we do air on Dash Radio. But let's get started with Warriors and Pelicans. I think the Pelicans surprised everybody in Game 3, got that 119-100 win. Series is now 2-1 in favor of Golden State. What were your thoughts on the Pelicans kind of coming out in blowout fashion in Game 3?
I was impressed. I think it would be very easy for the Pelicans to kind of get down, kind of get in their heads, similar to another playoff matchup we had when the Warriors went up 2-0. They could have had held their heads and kind of gave up in the series, and they didn't. And, for me, I think Anthony Davis has been stellar this entire series. And I think for them, the big part of that, that Game 3 win was just the energy early. And Rajon Rondo, I think playoff Rondo is extremely fun to watch. 21 assists in Game 3. I don't know. I just think the team was clicking. This was a team that knew they were going to take care of home court.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you saw with New Orleans was a team that was confident in their game plan, right? I think they, if you ask the Pelicans to a man and Coach Gentry, they thought they had an opportunity to get Game 2 in Golden State, right, or in Oakland. And so coming out Game 3, I was not surprised at all. I mean, you have a real legit two-way player in Holiday, who is just a guy who, folks, I think, kind of forgot about being in New Orleans. But in terms of those two-way players that are so highly coveted now, he's a legit guy, can score on offense and can bring it defensively. Anthony Davis is all world. I mean, we don't have to spend any time on the podcast talking about how good he is. And at times is the best player on the court, arguably all the time the best player on the court, depending on how you want to look at the matchups. So I think New Orleans got home. They got some of that home cooking. And I think this is a team that feels like, hey, we can go toe-to-toe. You got Rajon Rondo, who any indication with him going face-to-face with Draymond Green is not intimidated by the Warriors, and he's being playoff Rondo. And part of that is the assist. The other part is, man, he's going to, stare you down in the face and ask you to bring it, which is what a team like this needs. A little bit of moxie, I think, confidence within themselves. A team that feels like they can go, I think, toe-to-toe with the Warriors.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Holiday was very important. He was aggressive to start this game, had a nice start. And then Anthony Davis, like we've mentioned before on this show and every show, he's one of the best players in the league. And then Rondo, not only his play on the court, but I think from an experience, having those runs with Boston, kind of getting this team prepared, telling Anthony Davis what to expect. And the fact that he's kind of going at Draymond is kind of preventing him from Draymond going at Anthony Davis and kind of disrupting him. Can the Pelicans make this a series?
Yeah, I think they have right now, to a degree. I mean, if you look at the, Game 2, they were in Game 2 until the end. Game 1 obviously got a little out of hand, but I think the Pelicans are in this, especially when you have Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis playing at the level they're playing at. As long as they're getting contributions from guys like Mirotic, obviously Ian Clark was huge in Game 3. If role players step up for them and they can limit the Warriors as they did in Game 3, then yeah, they have a chance for sure, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think two things. One, you can't convince me, and I think the people in New Orleans and Preston and all the other folks, Preston Ellis, agree with this, that had that series started, a day after the first round wrapped up or 2 days after the first round wrapped up, I mean, New Orleans was red hot after that Portland series. And it was one of those things, in the NFL, like when you have a wild card team, they just play every week and they're just ready to go. I think having the time off definitely helped the Warriors. So, and cooled New Orleans to an extent. So, yeah, that first game against Golden State, I think they just got punched in the mouth and weren't ready for what was going on in Oakland. But to the point Kory was making a second ago, Rondo is a playoff vet. And one of the things he adds to the team, like you're saying, Nick, is having those battles with all those Celtics teams. You can go in the locker room, you have a guy like Rondo say, look, man, that's just one game. right? If you lose by 1,000 points, you lose by 1 point. It's just one. We need 4 to get to the next round. So having that veteran presence to say the younger guys, the inexperienced playoff guys, look, man, they got one, they got their 2, they defended their home court. That's what it's all about. We come back home, we get our 2, and we just have to get 1 in Oakland and make it back to New Orleans, and we can win this thing. So I still think their confidence is at an all-time high. And this idea of, look, you got to sort of, push back on the bully, and that's what Rondo's doing with Draymond and sort of deflecting and keeping him off their superstar and Anthony Davis. I mean, I think it's cerebral games, mind games by Rondo, who's one of the best in the league at doing those kind of things. So I think it's all to their advantage and all skewed towards them feeling confident that they can win the series.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys felt it, but when Curry did the little flex to the bench in Game 3, I felt like that was just like the wrong thing for him to do at that point in time. Like it was too early. So I felt the entire momentum kind of change in that moment.
Yeah, it definitely was interesting that he did do that early in the game, especially a flex like that, because it was the first quarter, correct? And it was
it was the first quarter.
Yeah, and it was just like, it was a nice play, like, don't get me wrong, but I kind of agree, especially on the road, like, calm down. I guess you want to get your guys involved. I mean, I still feel pretty confident about the Warriors. I have a good feeling that they're going to win Game 4. I know Preston and the Bird Call probably hate me for that, but I think in a sense it's a series, but Golden State also, I feel like, just missed a lot of shots and they weren't engaged. It kind of reminds me of, like, when Houston played the Timberwolves a couple times in the first round, or even the Game 2 against the Jazz for the Rockets, where they just, like, didn't play well. And I kind of feel like, yeah, the Pelicans played really well and the Warriors just didn't. But on the Pelican side, has Anthony Davis been the best player in the Western Conference side of the playoffs?
I mean, I guess, he's been more consistent because he really hasn't had any like really poor shooting nights like Harden has had. But both those guys are playing really good basketball. But I guess you can definitely make the argument. What do you have? 33 and 18 last game. I mean, he always has the really big
30-13 in the playoffs.
Yeah, he always has the big double-double. He does a little bit of everything. So, yeah, I think you can definitely make the case that he is definitely the best player right now in the Western Conference, in these playoffs at least.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the reason my answer is yes to that is because he historically, and as I think we're seeing in this series, has given the Warriors problems. And I don't want to go, I think when I was growing up, they had Gerald Wilkins on the Cavs. He was the Jordan stopper, right? And Jordan would cook him in the playoffs. And I think Ruben Patterson was temporarily the Kobe stopper, which ended horribly for him and the Blazers.
It's like everybody who gets the LeBron stopper name, it never works.
Right.
PJ Tucker, right?
There's whole people. But I think Anthony Davis is legit something you can look and say, wow, the Warriors don't have an answer for that. Yeah, Kevin Durant is as long as he is, but Anthony Davis can take him to the post. Draymond can't stay in front of him. He's hitting jumpers. He's hitting threes. Davis is. And I think if you can look to – so that's, I guess, how I evaluate the lens of everything right now. Until the world changes again in the NBA, what can you bring against the Warriors? What is your antidote to the Golden State Warriors? And to me, Anthony Davis is – when I watch him play, particularly against the Warriors – they don't have an answer for him. They don't. I mean, and you can, flex and point to the bench all you want if you're the Warriors, but Anthony Davis is a problem for them. And I don't think I could say that about, I obviously can't say that for anybody on the Spurs, not a pot shot, but I mean, come on, Danny Green. I can't say that about, even Harden and the team I'm pulling for, even for the Rockets. I think the plan there is to go, toe to toe, bucket to bucket. From Houston's perspective. But I think when you look at New Orleans, you look at Anthony Davis, I mean, they don't have an answer for him, man. And that, to me, gives you the feather in the cap to be the best player in the West right now in the playoffs.
Yeah, not only offensively they don't have an answer, but I think the fact that you can't really attack Anthony Davis defensively as much either, just because he's so versatile. I think, he's averaging 2 steals, 2 blocks as well. I think Kevin Durant.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Were you guys in the camp of, oh man, they're doing so well without DeMarcus? What do you guys think?
What's funny? I was just thinking in my head, I didn't know if I wanted to bring up the what if scenario, but I think if DeMarcus Cousins was like there, that this Pelicans team would be even much more of a challenge to the Warriors for the simple fact of like all the reasons you said Anthony Davis is unguardable. To me, it's the same reason I think DeMarcus Cousins in the same instance is unguardable towards this Warriors team.
Yeah, I could see the offensive impact he would have, but defensively, I feel like the Warriors would kind of try to exploit him. And I feel like he would be a great boost in this series, but I don't know if they would have been have been able to clean up Portland as easy. Obviously, Portland played really bad, but it would have slowed down the game and kind of helped them out. It's tough. It's hard to ever say that I'm going to lose a top 5 center and my team's going to be better. I think they're just changed the style of play. If DeMarcus Cousins can make some changes, I think that would really help. Maybe he, coming off a Achilles tear, maybe he comes back, loses some weight, gets a little bit more mobile and focus a little bit more on the perimeter and allows Anthony Davis. Because I think some of the problem was, DeMarcus Cousins would work inside a lot and it would force AD to the perimeter a little bit. But AD obviously is the best inside because he's such an athletic freak with that length and athleticism. So I think it depends on the adjustments that Alvin Gentry can make when Cousins is back. It's hard to ever say like, oh, we're going to lose one of the most talented players in the league and we're going to get better.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I was just wondering about that because I think I'm always for more talent is better than less talent, right? I don't know if people, I props to all the people that look at these numbers way more than I do, but I mean, it's like stop with all this nerd shit, right? It's like you need good players, like everybody. It's like I just saw Infinity War, so I'm like, oh man, it's like imagine someone's like, well, actually, the Avengers are better when Captain America does. It's like, shut up. You need all the people you can find on the Warriors. Like, it's not going to be. I don't know. I just think it's weird when, like you say, a top 5 center. It's weird when you're like, well. Actually, if you look at their on-off court, it's like, shut up. Like, you need good players to beat the Warriors. So I'm always in the camp of, if we got to do that can run, let's put them on the court and we'll figure it out. But
honestly, I think the contract situation is the most interesting thing. Him being a free agent, obviously going to the offseason, he was looking at max money, and now coming off an Achilles tear, it's like, yeah, we played a lot better without him. How much do we want to risk? Do we want to give him a long-term deal, a short-term deal? Is somebody going to come out of nowhere and offer him huge money?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers threw him money. Just saying, but
it wouldn't be that big a surprise, to be honest.
Yeah, especially if they miss out on the people they're going to miss out on. But yeah, no, I don't know where I was going with my point, but I had something there, and it's something gone.
But I think he likes New Orleans, though. Not to get too deep in. I mean, that's what Bird calls for.
He likes AD too. Him and AD are close.
Right, they're close. I think he likes Gentry. I think he's finally found a coach who I think gets him, and he respects. And I think he's found a home there. New Orleans is a town he likes. Let's just call it what it is. If you're a young black millionaire in the NBA, I mean, New Orleans is probably a better fit for you than Sacramento, culturally, socially, maybe. So, he's. I think he's found a home, and now, but money talks, and. Like the great Jim Rome always says, it's always about the money, especially when it's not about the money.
Especially when you're coming off an injury like an Achilles tear. Like, I don't think people understand that is very serious, and that pretty much took Kobe out of being good again, good anymore. As soon as he got that Achilles tear, that pretty much ruined the rest of his career. But let's talk Rockets Jazz. The Rockets came out and they just lit it up. 113-92 in Game 3, 2-1 lead in the series. What were your thoughts on that one?
Well, they shut down everyone who killed them in Game 2 was shut down in Game 3. Joe Ingles, he was 2 for 10 shooting.
Yep.
Donovan Mitchell had 10 points and wasn't much better. Derek Favors got hurt. Anytime you're having, an assortment. What was it at halftime? Like 70-42. It was just one of those like sheesh moments.
I looked at the score in the third quarter and I thought it was. I was like, it was kind of late, so I'll cut myself some slack. But I looked at the score and I thought I was like, oh, they're down 25. And then I looked at it again. I was like, holy shit, they're down 35 points in a second-round playoff game.
Yeah,
at home.
It's just one of those nights where no one on the Jazz besides, like Rudy Gobert wanted to score efficiently. And obviously, when O'Neal is your best scorer, you're probably not going to win a playoff game against the Rockets. Just saying. They just had a bad shooting night, which is going to happen because the Jazz aren't known for their offense.
And I'd say, as much as I just ragged on the numbers guys 5 seconds ago, the Houston Rockets, I mean, Daryl Morey is the godfather of this in a way in terms of, and he's got the coach who sort of laid the blueprint out in terms of the style of play. The numbers will start to work out eventually. The Rockets' whole style is we're going to shoot 53s a game. We're going to shoot 63s a game. We're going to play this style of play. And eventually, yeah, you might get hot and you might beat us and our defensive principles may not be there one night, but everything's going to regress to the mean. And eventually, at some point, we got guys who have been doing this a lot longer over a longer sample size. So when push comes to shove, everything will regress to the mean and we'll beat you. We'll win. And we'll win going away. And I think the style of play finally sort of came down. as great as Donovan Mitchell is. Kory, you make a great point. Everybody that was hot in game 2 suddenly was not in game 3. And the Rockets bank on that. They built this team to be able to do that style of play, to have that style of play for 7 games against the Golden State Warriors. And that's their only focus. And everyone else who's not the Warriors eventually will get caught up in that. And we'll get rolled over by that style of play. So, that being said, I had a sheesh moment too, but I mean, damn, that was wild. I found it kind of funny to see everyone in those jerseys in Utah getting smoked and looking ridiculous with those shirts on. So that was kind of funny.
Honestly, jumping on the stats, I felt like game 2 was an outlier for the Jazz shooting wise. Like they shot really well. Obviously, Houston just played some lazy defense in game 2. Game 3, they did pick it up. They made life harder for Donovan Mitchell, and I felt like they were more engaged in terms of rotations. But like you said, stats wise, like the Rockets were always going to shoot better from 3. They were eventually going to pick it up, and they didn't even shoot great from 3 this game. They shot 11 for 36, and they won 113-92. So if you're the Jazz, you can't even feel good. Like, can the Jazz even compete when they're fully engaged?
No, not on nights where the Jazz, like you mentioned, I was just looking at the 3-point percentages. Like the Jazz shot a better 3-point percentage in game 3 than the Rockets. Obviously they just made one more less shot attempt or whatever. But no, like if the Rockets offense is engaged and they're playing, even subpar defense, and they're throwing off these, no one on the Jazz is an elite scorer. I think we can all agree on that. If they're playing some subpar defense and they're making life tough on guys, and then their offense is just, even halfway decent, they're going to have nights like they did in game 3.
Yeah, I think this is, like I said, I think the numbers will bear it out. And the Rockets were the best team in the Western Conference all year long. I think, this is an inevitable game. I mean, if this goes past 5, I'll be impressed. I definitely can't go more than 6.
And another positive in terms of the Rocket side, Eric Gordon's starting to come to life. And he was really cold in the first round. He was cold to end the season. 25 points, 8 of 13, 4 of 8 from 3. I feel like that's somebody they really need against Golden State.
Yeah, actually, you can make the argument. I don't think Trevor Ariza has been that good in the playoffs yet, right? I mean, I know he's not had like a huge offensive impact.
Yeah, he's had a couple good starts, but no really huge games. I think he might have had one 20-point game.
Yeah, and I think that's right. With Ariza and a few of their role guys, right? I still don't think the Rockets have necessarily had just the signature game for them so far this playoffs. So I don't even think they're going necessarily, or at top speed from when we've seen them at their best in the season, in the regular season rather. So yeah, if Gordon can get going and we get guys going hot, right up until the Western Conference Finals for the Rockets. Yeah, I think more firepower that can come off the bench, because that's where I think a lot of people underestimate, the strength of the Warriors. Certainly they have some all-world talent in the starting 5, but then you come on the bench with Iguodala, you come with Sean Livingston. I mean, Swaggy P, who can knock down shots.
Uncle P, get it right.
My bad, but yeah. So if you have Rockets, if you can bring that second wave and can go shot for shot. With the Rockets second unit, or you mix Gordon in with the starters and play different lineups against the eventual opponent, which we were thinking is probably the Warriors. All the better for the Rockets. So having someone like Gordon getting going is key to them winning in the Western Conference Finals.
I agree. I think he's just a guy too that has he's a really confidence-based player, and when he gets hot, he's something that keeps going. When he gets cold, it's hard to get him out of that stretch, but when he's hot, he's a guy that can really give you 20 to 30 a night, and he can hit some of those shots that you really need when, James Harden is getting a ton of attention, Chris Paul is getting shut down. What have been your thoughts on James Harden and Chris Paul combo so far in the playoffs?
They had that, I don't know if you guys saw the soundbite of them arguing on the sideline.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was great. You love to see that. Even all of us have definitely played sports at a competitive level, and to see two guys just trying to get on the same page and just getting their points across, and then realizing that not letting it go any farther. This happened. This is not how it should have happened, and then whatever. Let's do this better, and etc. And then move on from it. I think those two guys play great together. I think didn't they just have their first assist together?
Yeah, I believe it was in game 3. It was a cut from James Harden to the rim. Or actually, I think James Harden might have hit Chris Paul for a corner 3. One of them hit a corner 3, I think.
Right, and it was the guy was that was their first assist. And I was like, what? Like those guys don't even play like with each other. Like that's how it feels to me. I think they're great. You know, we all, at least I had the worry or concern that they were, you know, they couldn't both run an offense, they couldn't both coexist, and they've clearly shut that down. You know, way previously, like 5 months ago, basically. But they've been great. I think, you know, whenever James Harden's kind of had like a shaky stretch or a night, Chris Paul has been there to elevate his game and vice versa. I think they've complemented each other very well. I think D'Antoni is great when, you know, Harden sits, Chris Paul's still out there. When Chris Paul sits, Harden's out there. He's done a great job with the rotations. I think that's been a huge part of their success, is the fact that they always have one of those guys on the floor at all times. I love the combination of Harden and Chris Paul.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, again, not to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but again, I'm always for talent coming together. So when the move was announced that Chris Paul was signing with Houston, I loved it, and I didn't think it'd be an issue. I say talk out of both sides of my mouth because I thought that was the case in OKC, and obviously that was a dumpster fire of epic proportions. So sometimes just talent to coming together is not always the best.
I think Houston has to be pretty happy they didn't make a move for Carmelo Anthony at this point.
Oh, God, Houston and about – you know what's funny? Well, I wonder what OKC would have looked like if that was Rudy Gay in that role instead of Carmelo Anthony.
I wonder what it would have looked like if they had kept Enes Kanter and Doug McDermott. Like, and I'm not even throwing shade at Carmelo to that extent, but just the fact those guys know their role and they can do their own thing. Where Melo is, I felt like there is an underlining issue that we do not know about that was a problem all year with Carmelo, especially the way that last press conference went.
I will say this, though, that if you trade Melo to Houston, it would be for like Ryan Anderson. So I don't know if like it has like a dramatic like negative impact.
I think just a negative vibe.
Bench role, then it
Well, Ryan Anderson was like, who's coming off the bench? Me? I'm not. So, but I digress. It's funny, though, that last press conference with Carmelo, that was a guy who knows he's opting in for his $28 million. That's what.
That's it. It was like an FU press conference. Like, F you, this season was terrible, but you bet your ass I'm taking that money.
That's what that was. That was for the accountants in the room. But yeah, so back to Houston. I think what you have, it's an interesting dynamic with D'Antoni and Harden and Paul, right? Like this is weird that I feel like the silver lining to their previous playoff failures, you know, individually and before they all came together, was that they know what people say about them, right? D'Antoni, your style can't win the playoffs. Harden, okay, you're a choker. Chris Paul, epic choker, overrated, you know, et cetera, et cetera. They know what the naysayers say. So I think they kind of have a bit of a foxhole mentality in terms of how they approach things. You talk about that scene on the bench the other night. It's like, hey, we're going to get this out. We're going to flush it out, and we're trying to, you know, do something together. So we're going to have our moments, but we're both professionals here. We're going to move past that, which I don't think Harden was in that space. I think Chris Paul's always been that kind of professional. I think he's always been kind of a douchebag too, depending on who you ask. But he's always been a pro. Same sort of like, I'd say, a Kobe sort of style. Like, we can hash it out, but no hard feelings. And I think Harden has reached a level of maturity. I don't think Harden was that way with Dwight Howard a few years ago, and that's partly why Dwight Howard's no longer there. But I think he's reached a level of maturity, and I think D'Antoni has had some growth as well to say, you know, I'm not going to conform to who I am as a coach. This is what works for me. This is what I'm comfortable doing. So I think it's a weird hodgepodge of that team for the key players and the key personnel with the coach, that they're saying, look, we've tried it these other ways. We've all had our baggage, you know, from when the playoffs are concerned. You know, let's do this together. And so I think that's all helping them come together. Whereas, you know, if Paul was to come to Houston with a championship or, you know, whatever iteration of somebody's individual success, I think it would be an issue. But since they've all sort of flamed out in their own ways individually, I think they all appreciate healthy dialogue and healthy debate to sort of achieve this ultimate goal of winning a championship.
Yeah, and that's why I felt so confident about the pairing in the start. Like, Chris Paul and James Harden set this up. Like, they talked to each other and they were like, all right, Daryl Morey, make it happen contract-wise. But they set this up and they're like, all right, we really need each other. If you ask me, Chris Paul was on the Rockets last year in that Spurs series against Houston. I'm pretty sure Houston wins and James Harden doesn't play that bad. Like, he needed that kick in the ass from Chris Paul. Like, he needs someone to get after him a little bit because he doesn't necessarily – like, he's starting to get to that maturity level, but he's never really had a vet that's really told him what's good. And I think that's Chris Paul, and he's really showing him how to win in the playoffs. as silly as that sounds, because Chris Paul obviously hasn't won anything, but he's won his fair share of first-round series. So,
yeah, I mean, the one thing I can say, like, if you had Chris Paul last year, rather, just like in hindsight, if you guys remember, like, a big issue I had with them last year against the Spurs, they only played like 7 guys. They had a 7-man rotation. Everyone was playing like 39-plus minutes. At least with like Chris Paul there, you could have had James Harden rest most. I think towards the end of that series in particular, James Harden was just out of gas and realized that he had to basically do everything by himself.
He had to do everything by himself. He was getting a ton of double teams. Eric Gordon and Lou Williams were no-shows. They just like couldn't create anything. So the fact of just having another creator would have been huge. But anything else on the Jazz side, any thoughts on Mitchell struggling in that game, or it's kind of expected from a rookie to finally actually have a bad game?
I mean, I voted for Jason Tatum Rookie of the Year, so.
Here we go.
I had Tatum as Rookie of the Year.
Adjusting.
Can't relate.
Did you really?
No, I'm just kidding. I think it's been Simmons.
I think
but
Tatum might
like
be the best rookie in the
been...
playoffs so far, though. You could probably make that argument, especially in the second round.
Yeah. Oh, by far. I think.
So
I think they're adjusting to Mitchell. They're just they're realizing the things he does, and they're just putting him in tougher positions to make more plays. Or
it also helps that the Jazz don't have any other offensive weapons, especially with no Ricky Rubio. Like Ingles is pretty good, but he's not like a showstopper or anything. It's not like, oh God, we got to prepare for Joe Ingles. So
that's another thing too. Do you guys think him having to be the primary ball handler now and kind of be the guy to also facilitate for others, that's taking away from his actual game?
It's hard. I think people don't think it's hard to play point guard, or they think they like this NBA fan thinks that like, all right, he can play shooting guard. Oh, he can play one guard. Like he can play wherever he wants and he just can, automatically adapt. It's not 2K. It's like a lot different than playing. And I think having somebody like Ricky Rubio out there that's actually, he's not the best offensive scorer, but he's still very smart on the offensive side of the ball, cutting, making the right pass, setting a pick here and there. And I think that really hurts them.
He has a really slow jump shot, I noticed, in the Thunder series in particular. Like, he takes a while to shoot the ball. Yeah. But it worked pretty well for him in that series. So
yeah, it's something you can easily fix too. I think he could probably quicken that up. But let's talk Eastern Conference. Sixers Celtics. Game 3 was probably one of the best games of the playoffs. 101-98. Boston up top, on top in OT in the confetti game. Now have the 3-0 lead in the series. Thoughts on this one?
Well, I thought it was nice for them to bring the confetti down for the Celtics that early. I unfortunately didn't get to watch most of the game live because I was out working, but I got home exactly when I needed to. I got home right when Redick turned the ball over and Jaylen Brown scored, and then Bellinelli hit the off-balance jump shot in the corner. The confetti flew, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then the nice back and forth overtime that ended with another Bellinelli attempt for an off-balance 3, in which Al Horford dominated that overtime, by the way. But I think that was the Sixers' best chance. I think we can all say that. And even though Philly fans didn't want to say this, in the previous series, this Phillies team is just very young, and they don't know how to win yet. And this was something I think I said before. When they played against Miami, that I don't know if they knew how to close games out, knew how to win. And they figured it out against Miami, but they have not figured it out against the Celtics. And obviously, I think Brad Stevens going against Brett Brown is a matchup not talked about enough because, Brad Stevens has been great out of timeouts. Brett Brown, didn't call a timeout in Game 2 during that really long scoring stretch by the Celtics in the second quarter. He had Ben Simmons inbounding the ball in overtime, which Al Horford stole. Just some questionable coaching decisions.
Yeah, where to start with this series? Kory, I saw your tweet where you said you got home and there was a gift waiting for you, essentially, that Redick turnover.
Yeah.
So it's nice. If there would have been a beer and a sandwich there, I think you'd have been in heaven. But
yeah, just a banana and a water.
But yeah, so here's the thing, right? Like, obviously, there's all-world talent on the 76ers, right? You got these young guys, and assuming Fultz's shoulder or arm or whatever works again, they'll be really good in the future. But like I was telling somebody on Twitter, man, like Philly was in the finals. If you listen to Philadelphia Twitter, they had themselves in the finals, and the dynasty was starting. Shaq and Penny 2.0, et cetera, and now they're too young, right? And now it's a thing. Like, oh, they just got together. Screw you guys. Let's look at the numbers and how much they play together and et cetera, et cetera. And like I always say, man, like people like Twitter's forever. Like, people keep these receipts, so just have that same energy. I would say this, like again, God, I'm harping on numbers. I sound like an old man, like yelling at clouds. But so
Numbers are everything.
so so when people say, okay, the process, you got to lose a lot and then you got to get these picks and the process work because we got really shitty and then we got these draft picks, we got all this cap space. True, fair point. On a balance sheet, that's right. Let me tell you where that doesn't help you. This is something Kory was just talking about. Experience, how to win. Boston is without a superstar. I loved Al Horford when he was at Florida, love him at Atlanta, but I mean, I think we can all agree he's not a superstar of the caliber of LeBron, KD, Kawhi, et cetera, et cetera. But those guys know how to win. Marcus Smart knows how to win. I forget which Morris twin they have.
Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus. Like those guys have been in the trenches. Brad Stevens has cut his teeth in some playoff battles. You could even do that with Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving if they were on the court now. When you lose a bunch of games and you get your brains beat in year after year after year, and you don't have vets, you don't have people that have had that experience. I mean, we talked about New Orleans earlier. You have Rajon Rondo, who's been in the finals and can look in the locker room and say, hey, look, man, shit, it's only one game. Focus, do what we need to do and shoot around tomorrow, and let's go get one of our own, right? You need a veteran to do that. And your veteran, if it's JJ Redick, who's saying that, former Clipper JJ Redick, then that's not the same message. I know people think, okay, that's, this is, sort of mojo and it's religion and not science, but it's true. That's why I think Okafor may never be the same again. That's why Nerlens Noel may not ever be the same again in the NBA. Their careers may never work out because they went from being really successful to getting their brains beat in the first couple of years of their NBA careers. And confidence for a professional athlete is everything, right?
It's a very good point.
Yeah, and so you say, okay, well, what does that have to do with the Philadelphia 76ers? They're losing in part because they're young. Yes, they're young, but there's no vet in that locker room that can say, look, guys, let's pull this shit together and let's come back and get one on our home court. They fought and they tried. That was all talent yesterday up until the last 2 minutes of the game in overtime. Then it turned into a game from the neck up. And from the neck up, you got Brad Stevens and Nick, you were saying matchup a second ago. I wouldn't even call it a matchup between the coaches because it's not even a fair fight, in my opinion. And so all of that has to do with, there's you got to break a few eggs to make this process thing right. There's some collateral damage to it. And part of that is you have a bunch of young kids who were high draft picks who are going to be superstars in 2 years. But right now, they're getting kicked in the dick in the second round by the Celtics. And that's just part of the lumps you take as part of the quote unquote process. Sorry, I'm really fired up about this.
And I feel like Miami was almost fool's gold because we've seen Miami so much that's like, oh, they're a tough playoff matchup for everybody. But in theory, they probably really weren't that good if you look at them talent-wise. Like, best offensive player, probably Goran Dragic, and no shade to him, but not very good. And they won that series, and they won it pretty easily. But again, the Heat aren't that good, and they didn't have anybody that scared you. And their playoff experience was kind of iffy. Yeah, they have some guys, but most of the guys from the good Heat teams aren't there anymore anyways. D-Wade was there, but obviously he only had like one good game in that series. Now you move to this series, like you said, Jay. Boston has guys that have been in the playoffs. They've matched up. Last year they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They do have the one young guy in Tatum, but they have so many guys who are experienced. Even Kyrie not playing, being there on the bench and telling these guys what to expect, I think is huge. And I think the relationship and the chemistry they have is big.
Kyrie looks like he's having so much fun too. And like every time Terry Rozier has like a really nice layup, they like always pan over to Kyrie on the sideline making the layup, which I think is really cool. I just had to throw that out there.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you don't see that because obviously Rozier being a young guy, but I think Kyrie feels pretty safe in his position. And for like Jay was mentioning, the losing, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid really haven't had to do much of that. Like, Embiid, he was there last season, but he missed most of the time. And when he played, they did win games. So the fact is that they just haven't had to do much of the losing. So they're like, all right, now they have to react to this situation. They're down 0-2, and they really didn't bounce back because I expected them, because they are definitely the superior talent team, to really have a nice game yesterday and win in double digits, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I feel like Ben Simmons has kind of been like lackadaisical this series. Like
he hasn't been fully engaged, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't see the Ben Simmons I saw in the first round. I don't see the same fire, the same aggression. I mean, not obviously in a bad game too, and obviously if you look at games 1 and game 3, the numbers are still solid. But I just haven't felt like he's been at his his locked-in peak.
I believe, if based off what I wrote on Twitter, it was a plus minus. He is minus 92 against Boston this entire season.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
So Brad Stevens has just made his life miserable. And I think for a young player, you're not used to that. It's happened to LeBron when he was young. Ben Simmons is just getting put out of the game. Boston has done a great job in transition defense, and that's an area where Ben Simmons usually attacks or he gets the mismatches. They pretty much have been like, all right, bro, shoot the ball. And he doesn't obviously want to shoot because that's not his game, but they haven't allowed him to get inside. And that's where it goes back to Brett Brown, because Ben Simmons being the young player and obviously being a rookie, you need to put him in position to succeed, and I feel like that hasn't been the case.
It's weird, though. I wonder how much of that is, okay, that's where we really draw the line of demarcation, right? So, this young guy, he reminds us of Magic. He reminds us of LeBron. And, this go back in the Wayback Machine and whatever, but Magic was a rookie. I mean, he had Kareem, obviously. But he's in the finals, and he played probably the best game as a pro in Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals, where he had a triple-double, I think, and had 42 points, played at center. And I just point that out to say, if something's not working for Ben Simmons offensively, or something's going on, he's up against a tough scheme from the opposing coach. I mean, how much do we say, okay, he's a rookie, he hadn't figured this out? How much of it do we say, well, but the greats, even at a young age, sort of figure it out, right? Find a way to make an impact on the game if it's not just my passing or my shooting or whatever. I find a way to positively impact the game, which I think would bear itself out in the plus minus, right? So in other words, you can have positive impact on the game and it not just be the sort of counting stats, right? So I guess this is, do we say, hey, well, he's young, he's a rookie, or is it something more and say, well, maybe he's really good, slow down on he's the greatest of all time or is about to be there?
I think you always have to slow down on those statements. I think it's easy to be like, he has the potential to be there, but obviously he still has to put together for years. And durability is obviously always an issue when you're, trying to be a great player. That's one thing that's always benefited LeBron. He hasn't missed time. Simmons obviously already missed this season. So I think part of it is, he's young, but also, like you said, Jay, I think you have to at some point be like, all right, I need to have a bigger impact on the game. I will say defensively in the fourth quarter and overtime, he did pick it up, but it's like, why didn't you play that way the entire game? I think some of it's young. And I also think the fact is, like Jay, you mentioned, not having one of those true veterans who's won a championship, or one of those not that I don't think JJ Redick's a leader, but I think you just need one of those a different type of leader. I don't know. He just doesn't come off to me as one of those guys that I'm looking for, and I think this Sixers team could benefit from. Not even somebody who has to play. It could be one of those honestly Kendrick Perkins. He doesn't play for the Cavs, but from what I've read and heard about him, he's one of the best guys in the locker room. I believe when they got smoked by the Pacers in Game 1, they were like, all right, Perkins was the guy in the locker room. It's only one game. It's only one game. You think we're worried about one game? So I think that's the type of guy that they don't have on this team.
Yeah, I agree. Even though Redick obviously is a vet and everything else, I don't think he's a vet that like you mentioned with Perkins, can go into a locker room after a loss and rally up the guys and give a speech where everyone's like, yeah, that's what we needed to hear. I just don't see that from JJ Redick. I'm sure he said something. But I don't know. I just think
I think Embiid will be that guy in the future. He's just not there yet, and it takes time. You can't be that guy if you never had any success or any hardships. And in the long run, who knows? Getting swept. I'm not saying they're getting swept for sure, but getting swept by the Celtics team that is a lesser team talent-wise could benefit them in the future.
They're getting swept. That's happening.
I mean, it also doesn't help, though, when you look at the supporting cast. I mean, obviously, Bellinelli had that big-time shot.
Covington's been rough.
Robert Covington is trash. I mean, he is literally the ShopRite great value Paul George, but way worse. I can't get over how streaky he is shooting wise. There's nights where obviously he had 22, I think, in Game 2, and then he had 1 point tonight or yesterday, and then 3 points in Game 1. And that's a guy who for them was a consistent offensive threat all season from at least the 3-point line.
His shot selection is very questionable at times. I would say that a lot for some of the Sixers players too, even Bellinelli. He and JJ Redick.
Sargic does that too at times. He takes just very contested shots.
Well, and I think that's another question. Obviously the Sixers shot better in the Heat series. Do you think them shooting worse in this series has to do with themselves just getting closer to the mean, or is it more so, Boston's defense just kind of getting into them?
It's Boston's defense. If you watch Boston there's not a single person, even like Shane Larkin, in those 14 minutes he played yesterday. I saw Shane Larkin dive for 2 loose balls in 14 minutes.
He plays hard.
Yeah, I think everyone on that team plays hard. There's not very many times where I watch a Celtics game. Me and my dad were just talking about this, and he goes, I never liked the Celtics, but I watched them. He goes, they play hard. He goes, I don't ever see them really taking a possession off. He goes, they play hard almost every possession, and I agree. I think if you watch a full 48 minutes, there's very little time that you see the Celtics saying, "Oh wow, they're not engaged."
Another guy impressive on the Celtics side is Jason Tatum. I thought he was great in his rookie season. It's been amazing, but I did not expect this from him in the postseason. He's been so poised and just like cooking whoever is out there. He really doesn't care. He tried to dunk on Embiid yesterday.
Yeah, and I mean, in overtime in the fourth quarter, he was the guy who was scoring. Ben Simmons scored, Tatum went down and scored. Embiid scored, Tatum went down and scored. He was the one matching them bucket for bucket in that overtime.
And it wasn't even easy buckets either.
No,
which I think
going right at Embiid, going right at a 240-pound Embiid with height and everything else, and just take. Well, I mean, obviously Embiid had 5 fouls. He was just playing aggressive, but it was great.
What are our
I
thoughts
saw
on
some Twitter,
Brad?
man. Somebody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I saw this on Twitter. Someone said, "Man, this Fultz thing better work out because Tatum is going to be a stud. Is a stud."
And that puts a ton of pressure on Fultz, especially sitting there on the sideline watching the series. It's been weird he hasn't gotten any minutes because I thought he might get some. TJ McConnell's a guy I think that deserves more minutes for the Sixers because he's everything that they're not doing right now in terms of energy. He's just scrappy as hell, trying to do whatever he can to win the game. But let's talk Brad Stevens. Like, there has been a ridiculous amount of talk about Brad Stevens, people even pronouncing him the best in-game coach in NBA history. And, saying that they would take Brad Stevens over any player moving forward. What are your thoughts on this? Is this overrated, underrated? Where is this hype level?
All right, so this is how I stand on this. I think he's a great coach. I think he is fantastic. I think without question he's top 3 in our league right now. I think the praise right now is a little bit over the top, not because it's not warranted, but simply because of the injuries and who they have and who they don't have, and the level of success is being sustained still. So I think that's what makes people say, like, oh, he's the greatest ever. Like, look what he has and look what he continues to do. I do think we should pump the brakes a little bit. The greatest of all time is, I mean, that's
a reach when you haven't won a championship.
Right? Yeah, it's a little
right. Weren't you in games in those championship series? Like,
yeah,
you should have made some adjustments then.
Yeah. So I think that's a little extreme. But
has he stopped LeBron yet? I don't think so.
Yeah, but I think without question, his stock is definitely rising year by year. I don't think there's been a year where we can honestly say Brad Stevens hasn't gotten better in some way, or if his team hasn't, I guess, produced better in some way. Isaiah Thomas and that gang, that team wasn't supposed to be that good, and he elevated their stock. This team, the assortment of injuries, he elevates their stock. So I think, without question, he's a top 3 coach. You can make an argument that he might be the best right now, but greatest of all time. Let's ease up.
Yeah, I think I would go. See, that's where I give the edge to Spo over Brad Stevens, is because Brad Stevens is still kind of doing the college model in a way, right? Like he had Kyrie for about half a season, but Kyrie was out, hadn't had Hayward, where Spo had to coach like LeBron, prime big 3, right? So I think in the NBA, being able to manage those superstar personalities and work with that talent. And of course, that's a great problem to have. And Brad Stevens is probably like, yes, please give me Hayward, give me Kyrie, let's trade for Kawhi, and let me try to coach them as well. So, but the only reason I pumped the brakes is because we hadn't seen what he's done with superstars yet in the NBA. It's only been sort of like the scrappy, hard-nosed lunch pail guys for the most part. Or rookies or young players, which he's done a great job. But I think I would just hold I agree. I think he's top 3, but I would put him behind Spo. Obviously, I think I'd put him behind Pop in the NBA. But I think because Spo has done it sort of similar circumstances, but also had a run with coaching superstars, which is a key element of coaching the NBA. Just ask David Blatt. So that's why I put Stevens slightly behind someone like Spoelstra. But yeah, I wouldn't have him any worse than probably 3rd in the NBA.
I think Spo's stock too was elevated. I think he didn't get enough credit for those 4 years in Miami when LeBron was there. Yep. Everyone saw it as like, well, you have 3 superstars and you have LeBron James, the on the court coach. So who really needs a coach? And then obviously when LeBron left, that team still remained consistent. So now I think Spoelstra gets the credit he deserved, but it wasn't always there, which is something I think different than Brad Stevens. Who knows? Brad Stevens may not have the same success with a superstar, but he already has this built-up resume because he's doing it without the big guys, like you mentioned.
Well, and that's interesting. Yeah, I was. It's funny because I'm here in Seattle, and that's sort of what's happening with the football team. This is not apples to apples, but like Little Dicky says, you can still compare them. So there's a Little Dicky reference for anyone listening to the pod. With Seattle, they had a lot of success. The Seahawks did because Legion of Boom, Russell Wilson, all those guys were on rookie deals, right? And so Pete Carroll was, this really good sort of college coach and brought some of that to the NFL. But these guys start getting on their contracts. People want to get paid. These guys are veterans now. They're all pros. And it's a little harder to coach them now, right? So Wilson, he's drafted a lot of young kids again, and he's feeling really energized if you watch these press conferences here in town because he's got young third and fourth round guys and hungry guys and undrafted guys, and it's kind of like Legions of Boom 2.0, right? So, I don't mean that to say that Brad Stevens is like some glorified college coach, but I think there's an element to managing personalities in the NBA that is, I think, a key component of coaching, which I think time will tell. But I think Brad Stevens is cut for it.
I think you'd even make the comparison to like OKC. Billy Donovan was a fantastic college coach, and he had to try and manage, 3 superstars. One thinking he's still a superstar in Melo and Westbrook. I think you can kind of see the disadvantages of coaching, stars with not enough, young, hungry guys.
Right.
If you wanted to compare the
and
two.
lack of an NBA resume. Because, Billy Donovan's lack of an NBA resume probably hurts him there where he's not a strong presence. And he's kind of known as somewhat of a nice guy. And I think that hurt him because OKC really didn't listen. And going to the Pete Carroll thing, I think one of Pete Carroll's big issues, not only the egos, but he really just didn't adjust to the NFL. Like in terms of him still trying to play that mentality of, hard physical football when it's such a passing league now. But that's for another podcast, another website probably. But,
Right. Off the line of scrimmage, the new website coming, football, off the line.
1 yard line.
Yeah.
You were on the 1 yard line.
So, but back to Brad Stevens, and I also think some of it is like, I don't think the Celtics roster is amazing, but I think people are making it seem like these guys are terrible. Al Horford, right. Al Horford is an all-star player. Jason Tatum was just a top 3 pick. Jaylen Brown was a top 5 pick. Terry Rozier was, I think, a top 20 pick in a draft, maybe top 25 pick in the draft, whatever. And he's had time to develop. Aaron Baines, I hate him anyways, but he's been pretty good for them. Marcus Smart's always been this scrappy dude. Marcus Morris, same thing. Shane Larkin and Semi Ojeleye playing minutes. That's big props to Brad Stevens. With the other guys, I think some of it's like, all right, guys, like, they're not terrible. They're not like the worst team ever. But I will say Brad Stevens has them playing at a level. They're beating a team that they probably shouldn't be beating right now. But he still has to win, and he still has to beat LeBron. Like, for you to try to make an argument saying that you'd rather have him over another player, and he's lost to a player named LeBron twice already in the playoffs before, he's not making the adjustments. And obviously he's a godly level player, but I still think you have to hit the highest level of success before you can be the best. We can do a lot of guys can win the first and second round, but if you're not winning in the Eastern Conference Finals or the finals, it's a lot different.
Yeah, win when it matters.
Exactly. And so, and obviously him being a coach, some of that isn't on him, but last year against the Celtics, against the Cavs, they just got cooked. So, and it wasn't even close. Where were the adjustments there?
Right.
And it's not like that Cavs team was amazing because they got bodied by the Warriors in the next round. So, I think Brad Stevens is a great coach, but to say that you would take him over a top 10 player in this league, like, I get it. You can have a coach for a longer time, but if you're asking me if I would rather have a top 10 player for the next 15 years or Brad Stevens for the next 15 years, I'm probably going with a top 10 player. So,
the only thing I can say to the last year's team is that, even Isaiah Thomas was banged up and they did rely on him heavily, but I agree that there's a lot left to be done.
Yeah, he's made great adjustments, but also Brett Brown on the other side of the court, he hasn't played a ton of playoff basketball. His team is very young, and maybe he is making adjustments. Brett Brown isn't the one who turned the ball over twice in overtime in the fourth quarter. That was J.J. Redick and Ben Simmons. So yeah. I think some of it's got to be like a grain of salt. I think people are getting a little bit too crazy on this Boston hype.
There are a lot of people, not to change subject, calling for Brett Brown to be fired, though, from Philly. And they've been saying it all year, and the chirps are getting louder and louder as they struggle in this series in particular.
Which is kind of ludicrous if you think about it, because Philly's not even supposed to be in the second round of the playoffs. Going to the season, people weren't even sure if they'd make the playoffs or they'd be an 8 seed and get knocked out in the first round. And we at some point believed that they could possibly go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Obviously, they're going to lose this series, but still.
Yeah, and if I'm Brett Brown, I say F that. I took all those ass whoopings. I'm staying here to see. I'm reaping some of these benefits, man. No,
I'm at
not
least staying here till my career record gets to 500.
right, right. I don't have time. No, to have you guys just bring in Larry Brown or some bullshit. No, sir.
But let's talk about the Cavs and Raptors. LeBron, King James does it again. Game winner off the glass last night. Ridiculous shot going left, 8 seconds left, from the full court. What were your thoughts on that? What were your thoughts on the game?
Well, I can feel the hot seat under Dwayne Casey. No, but the Cavs came out really hot. Toronto started a little bit slow, and I had said, I thought it was kind of like a mental thing. I feel like the Raptors, at least early on, looked like they were defeated. Obviously, they made the game close. And Kyle Lowry, he's, for a guy who I've crapped on for being poor in the playoffs, he's played moderately well this entire series, and he was good last night again. DeRozan didn't look into it, didn't look interested, kind of clocked out. To me, it felt like you already felt like they were beat. Kevin Love showed up again. Kyle Korver hitting threes, which is exactly what LeBron needs. And LeBron being the greatest basketball player of all time, showing up and hitting that phenomenal game winner. Which I don't know if you guys saw. Sports Center, their top 10 was just 10 different angles of LeBron's game-winning shot. That was the top 10. It was 10 different angles of his shot. I was like, wow, this is really what's happening. It's LeBron Center now.
It was probably the best content they had all year.
Yeah, it probably was.
Oh man, let me tell you what, Toronto, God, in time, you will know what it's like to lose. It feels so desperately that you are right, and to lose all the same. I mean, damn it, resist it, run from it. Destiny still arrives, man, and Destiny's wearing a 23 jersey for Cleveland, and God, I don't even know. So I'm just doing the shrug, man. I don't even know what to tell Toronto anymore. I'm like, shit. I mean, I wish I had something. I just don't. I don't like. Something we were talking about earlier before we started the pod. Like, I can't. I'm sorry, man. I can't end up on a top 10 from 10 different angles if I'm Toronto. I'm going to run at LeBron. I'm throwing people at him. I'm going the new LeBron rules, right?
Especially if he took it in the full court.
Especially at the full court. And I saw that there was some, because I guess Casey said, I think Casey said in the postgame that the plan was to double and basically LeBron just had a head of steam. But I think some sort of Zabruder film type Twitter folks were like, well, it looks like they weren't even planning to trap him.
And then OG said, well, no, we didn't even think about trapping him. So obviously there was some really big disconnect.
Right. Casey's like, look, man, do me a solid. Can you just it's like The Godfather when Abe Pagoda's guy's like, hey, can you guys let me get me out for old time's sake? He's like, sorry, man. No, that's on you.
Not this time, Sal. Not
this time, Sal. Can't do it. But yeah, man, I just don't understand why you're like, okay, we're just going to try to go toe to toe with LeBron. I get it out of his hand as much as I can. I mean, this is armchair quarterbacking, obviously, but geez, I'm just speechless because I don't know why you're insisting on letting LeBron beat you. Like, why is that the narrative, right? Like, if the front page of the Toronto Times or whatever the paper is in Toronto says, Kyle Korver scores 50.
I believe
Toronto Star. Thank you, sir. If it says, Kyle Korver scored 56, Cavs win. Fine. Okay. That happened. That's fine. But to have LeBron just keep stunning you like that in front of the world is just unacceptable. I don't know. It's just a lot.
Jonathan Ibrahim, he said to me that it's kind of like pushing. He was like, because I said like the Raptors have to change it. And he goes, the Raptors won't change it because they won't give up the national televised games, even if they lose because of money. And I really hope that's not the mentality in Toronto, that as long as they're getting their ass whooped and making money, that it's okay. Because I don't know how you could put the fan base through this year in and year out. What are they against LeBron in the last
1 in 29, 1 in 29 on the road against LeBron?
Why would you even want to it's just brutal. It's literally like you said, Jay. It's LeBron just suns them. It's any parent to baby meme you can just play in the face of LeBron and Lowry and DeRozan. He just owns that shot. Team.
was a running like fadeaway bank. Like that's just some shit you try, like you do on your little brother, right? You're like, I'll try this.
You're running off the court. You're running out of the gym, like having fun.
Yeah, if he does it another 9 times, he's only making it like one other time. Like he ain't making that an effective, efficient amount.
Right. Oh man, that was just and so. I remember Toronto used to bitch all the time about being on NBA TV, right? Our series on NBA TV. It's like, well, you're on ESPN now, and this is what you're giving us. So, hope it was fun.
You know what I saw too? That LeBron shot to win the game. That was his first off-balance shot all game.
Interesting. Well, which I don't actually know is true because he shot fadeaways in that game.
Stats. It was one of those ESPN stats. You know, they just somebody goes back there and they write something down. They go, I think this is a real stat, and they go, oh, okay, yeah, let's run it.
So it's actually when LeBron was dribbling with his left hand, that was his first off-balance shot of the game.
There you go. Yeah,
because that's ESPN for you. But
the first time fading away to the left.
So we're trying to get headquarters for Off the Glass, and meanwhile ESPN is paying some kid to promote that bullshit stat.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, guys, we actually can look up the stats ourselves, and we know if they're not true. We do have the internet nowadays.
But it's no different than the one stat. You know, LeBron had 7 fadeaways. That's the most since 2015. It's like you guys keep track of how many people shot a fadeaway in a game. Like what? There's no way. There's been 100 years of basketball. You don't have that many shots.
No, the worst is when they're like, all right, you know, in the last 1.5 seasons, this player leads the league in this stat. Like, what happens to the other 3 seasons that they've been in the league? They haven't done shit. Like,
yeah,
they always. I remember
always to fit a narrative.
For Kirk Cousins, like, all right, I don't know why I remember this so well. Maybe because it aggravated me when the Packers and Redskins were matched up in the playoffs. I know this is off topic, but they were trying to like make the stats look like Kirk Cousins was a better quarterback than Rodgers just based off of like 2 weeks of play. And I was like, guys, like everybody watching this knows that Kirk Cousins isn't even on that type of level. So why are you trying to like send a narrative that doesn't make any sense?
Kirk Cousins at home, like that's wrong. That's not right.
He's like, I can't even believe this shit. But
yes.
on the Cavs side, Kevin Love stepped up. That was, I think, like a low-key thing that's really important for the Cavs, especially moving forward even in the next series. Having LeBron get some help, and the supporting cast in general has just been a lot more engaged. Maybe it's the fact they just feel a lot more confident against the Raptors, but I think that's going to help them long-term.
I mean, yeah, Kevin Love's already raised his field goal percentage from 32 in round 1 to 37 now. So he's on the rise, and like you mentioned, you know, he's been having LeBron have a consistent scoring threat who isn't like a 3-point. Because obviously Kyle Korver's been pretty consistent in these playoffs. Having a scoring threat that isn't a guy who just shoots off your passes is what he's needed, you know, so far in the playoffs. And Kevin Love is giving him a little bit of everything.
Yesterday was the best game I saw Kevin Love play all postseason.
Yeah, because he was aggressive down low, I think, more so than we've seen.
He actually played some good defense too.
Yeah, I think at times Kevin Love gets too comfortable behind the 3-point line. Obviously, this is a space the floor and shoot it until, you know, we're blue in the face type of league. But when he goes down low and he starts bullying, obviously he got a ton of matchups with Kyle Lowry too. But
that's another thing. They did a great job getting the matchups they want at Cleveland, and Toronto just was like, "Oh yeah, do whatever you want. We'll switch for you."
Yeah, and when Kevin Love is down there and battling, 16 rebounds is obviously great, and I'm not sure. I mean, we're offense just one, but still, you know, I think I agree, Nick. When he's aggressive like that, that's when the Cavs are at their, you know, quote unquote best.
I think that was the Kevin Love that LeBron thought he was getting when he came back to Cleveland. I think that was Minnesota Kevin Love. He's on the glass. He's getting outlet passes. He's getting a few blocks, bullying folks in the post. I remember one time on Ibaka or somebody. I thought it was the Royal Rumble. Like he had him.
Yeah, he was banging with Ibaka, which, I mean, in a lot of the previous times, we saw Ibaka bang him out of the post. Even Pascal Siakam, like, is a good defender, and he really owned him.
Yeah, and I think – and this is – okay, so extrapolating a little bit here. I think – so Kevin Love came on, and he had to do sort of the Bosch role, right, in the big three, and he was the third banana and was trying to figure out, you know, where he was in the universe and everything like that. But – I have an argument here if, and you know, the numbers guys, again, will have to figure out the math on some of these contracts or whatever. But if you could elevate Kevin Love to the number 2 option in that Cleveland team, so he goes up to the Kyrie spot, I guess, and you find a third option who is a 3-and-D guy who can hit open shots when LeBron needs him to and can take the tougher defensive assignment, perhaps. I think you could come to Cleveland with or come to LeBron with a package as Cleveland and say, look, man, you can go to the finals until you retire. Here in the East, you're home, et cetera, et cetera. This is your team still. And I think, because everyone's like, well, he's going to LA, he's leaving. I think he's leaving. But if you were to say, if you're getting this Kevin Love, and Kevin Love's elevated to the second guy, right, which I think he's totally thriving in right now, just extrapolating these last couple of games for Kevin Love. And you can find, I don't know who the hell this is, but maybe not superstar money necessarily, but a guy that doesn't mind being second, third option, knocking down shots, and can D up on Kevin Durant when they play, or Kawhi Leonard or whomever, and LeBron doesn't necessarily have to take that matchup. I think there's an argument to say, well, LeBron, stay here, we'll max you out, and just retire a Cav and keep going to the finals, and maybe, Houston will get Golden State 1 year or whatever, and you get, chip number 4, number 5. Because I don't think he needs 4 or 5 to make the whole Jordan argument. I think he needs more than 3, but I don't think he needs 6. So
I don't think he needs 6 either. I agree.
So I wonder, if this new Kevin Love and LeBron's actually freaking trusting him and not giving him the side eye and subtweeting him, it's interesting. I think the Cavs could now you got it some with that Nets pick, and there's just so much bad money on their books with Tristan and JR. But I don't know, man. Like, if you could get a
Carmelo Anthony, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Get out of here. I think it is a possibility that they could retool, like maybe not even just getting 1 3-and-D guy, but maybe getting like an assortment of role players, somewhat like Houston has, like moving that Nets pick to somebody, getting off some of the bad contracts and taking on 2 or 3 guys that actually can play both ends of the basketball. Like, I think that could really intrigue him. And then looking at it, like, people keep saying the Lakers, like, what the hell is he going to go to the Lakers so he can lose and not even make the finals? Like,
right.
There ain't no one going there. I'm so tired of that.
If he does that, it's all about money and like Hollywood and fame and type of stuff like that. It's not about winning, unless, like, even if Paul George goes with him, like, I'm not 100% banking on that to be a championship team to beat Golden State. Like,
especially after he played this year.
Exactly. And like, if I'm LeBron, I'm thinking to myself, like, yo, I can go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, I might sweep this round. Who knows? I might even sweep in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then the Warriors, they got to deal with Houston, and they're going to come in a little bit more tired than I am. Like, I want to stay in the East. And the whole Philly concept, yeah, it does make sense in ways, but like Ben Simmons and LeBron, like, spacing wise, it just isn't the best idea. So like Cleveland, like, even though it's not great, it still might end up making the most sense. And LeBron probably will have the most control in Cleveland. The Nets pick easily could turn into something, especially with teams not having cap money. They might want to get rid of somebody. But then again, like, they have some really bad contracts themselves. But hey, Kobe Altman, make something happen.
But this is the best time. I think you could really argue. If I was LeBron, I'd call Paul George and say, look, man, you saw how that shit went down in Oklahoma. You like, fishing and sort of the simple life. Come to Cleveland. I'll take you on Lake Erie. Well, and we'll be in the finals next year. Like, sign and trade and come to Cleveland. That was the plan last year, right? For Kyrie, basically. Like,
I think that was a possibility, but I don't know if they really, like, for the sign and trade the work, they would have to get OKC to agree, and they would have to send them something to take on some of their bad contracts. Is it really worth it to, like, sign Paul George and then trade a really high lottery pick? Like, let's say if LeBron does sign back with Cleveland, he's not signing long-term, most likely. He's going to probably sign another, 1+1 or a 1-year deal so he can hold all the leverage and all the power. So it's like, do we trust LeBron? Then we trade away this pick, and then we have Paul George, who, and I'm not saying Paul George is a bad player or anything like that. I still think he's an all-star type player, but the inconsistencies shown this season wouldn't make me 100% confident I'm LeBron. I think if I'm LeBron, I'm looking for more of like an assortment of players, because there's just so many bad defensive players on this team. Like, as good as Kyle Korver's been at times, like 3-point shooting wise, he's great, but defensively he's not great. And then, like Jay said, if we're going to have Kevin Love as our second scoring option, we know he's not a great defender. So we need to kind of surround these guys, and we need to conserve LeBron's energy. So we need to make his life easier defensively. We need a lot of two-way players, not some of these guys that can just play one end of the floor.
Yeah, I agree that I've always been a fan of getting, a collective group of talented players overall than, stacking your team with, talent on top of talent, unless it's like good talent on top of talent, like the Warriors and the Rockets, they did it right. And, OKC tried it, but like, the characteristics of the guys you're stacking up together have to
be perfect
slightly. Yeah. And obviously you really don't know until you get into the season. I do think Paul George would be better in Cleveland than he would be in OKC, simply because, LeBron isn't the same type of, even though he's the point guard, let's just call it what it is. he's not the same point guard as like Russell Westbrook. Westbrook's going for himself mostly, and he does like a lot of dish off passes. Like LeBron really gets guys going and orchestrates the offense more. But I agree. I don't even know what you would send in like a sign and trade for Paul George. You know, Rodney Hood and George Hill. Like, there's not like a collective package I think that would even interest OKC in that scenario.
But you're
It's
holding
like,
all
you
the
got to
cards
take
to
Melo.
Cleveland because Paul George could walk anyway. So it's either nothing or you get Rodney
True.
Hood and you get so if you're OKC, you go we go Iverson model, right? We just build around guys who build around Russ. We don't get him another superstar. We get him a boatload of Rodney Hoods and Steven Adams and Larry Nance Juniors and you guys are happy us not running a single play for you. And we'll see if we can just ride Russ to the finals or whatever it is, I think. And you say, well, look, you can have this pick or you can take some of the shit money off our books and get something for Paul George because he can walk either way on July 1st is what and if you're Presti, maybe say, well, I'm not going to, hamstring our future for that. So no thanks. And
That's what I would say if I'm Presti. I already made some, trades that I'm already stuck with Melo for another year at 28 mil. Unless like one of these contracts I can kind of like or something somewhat short, I'm like taking on a top 10 pick, but I don't know if that pick's even going to help me this year. Is that going to annoy Russ anyways? Like, because he's not getting help instantly, and the team's probably going to be worse than the previous season. I don't know. It's just Paul George to Cleveland is a tough thing to make happen. Like, I just think it's a tough from a contract standpoint. But if you could get a third team involved, maybe some team is like, yo, if I am the Nets, I'm looking for my pick back. I will take your garbage contracts if you want, and I will help facilitate a trade. But like, unless you're finding a team, there's only 7 teams, I believe, going to the offseason right now that have cap without making any moves. You need one of those teams to help you, and you're going to have to pay them handsomely because cap is going to be at a premium this year. Yeah. So I think they're in a tough spot. They do have a great asset. Anytime you're willing to trade a top 10 pick, I think you can get value back. But it is also a very top-heavy draft from what I've read so far, that it's a lot of like the top 7, top 8 players are the real locks. So it's like, how much can we get? How much can we help LeBron? Like, I don't think the idea of him leaving Cleveland is like 100% in stone. Like a lot of people think it is, but I don't think like he is from Cleveland. He loves that place. He went back there for a reason.
I think especially because they're, obviously now they're up 3-0 against the quote unquote best team in the East.
And the East isn't there yet. The East, like the overall talent, like the Sixers are still a year or two away. Like, yeah, Boston healthy might be able to beat them in a 7-game series, but they haven't proven that yet to be healthy.
Yeah, and if you're LeBron, I just, unless you're going to Houston or you're going to a team that's already having great success, it just doesn't make sense. Like we've said this, it just doesn't make sense to go to a conference that is so deep and tough when you've already got the easier conference. Obviously Cleveland may not be the ideal destination for superstars. You may have a tough time bringing in those guys, but leaving and going west, and the Lakers is not even a chance to me. It just doesn't make sense. I think any Eastern Conference team who has like Philly, I think will be in the conversation. But at the end of the day, I think the Cavs are in like they have to really mess up in their offseason conversation with LeBron for him to walk.
And you got to sit down with LeBron and look at ideas and possibilities. I mean, this is something I think will be mentioned, but I don't think they could do it asset-wise unless they're willing to really compromise their future, which they could because LeBron and getting a superstar player would do that. Maybe they try to really go hard for Kawhi. Like, that could be something that they do. They offer the Nets pick. They offer like 2 future first-round picks, But I think some of it's going to have to take luck, and it's going to have to be something where they have to kind of work all over the place and kind of really make something work. It could be, multiple players involved in a trade, multiple team type of thing. But that's for another day because they still obviously have to get to the finals and, see what they can do in the finals. Who knows, maybe knock on wood, but somebody goes down for Golden State or 2 players go down and all of a sudden it's a 7-game series and LeBron wins and there's not even a mention of him leaving Cleveland.
Tainted ring. Tainted ring.
You could say the same thing, though, for Golden State when Kyrie and Love went down.
Oh, it's a tainted win. I'll say that all day. That was an extremely tainted ring.
I disagree. I don't think you can ever call any championship or ring tainted because at the end of the day, they didn't control the fact the player got injured.
No, I don't take anything away from them. They won. They were the better team in that series. But going against a team that didn't have Kevin Love, then only had Kyrie for not even a full game. He got hurt in overtime in that first game. it definitely has some kind of ramifications.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's always going to be written in history, but I think, they won the championship, and I'm sure they could say for the Warriors respond to be like, well, Draymond got suspended for possibly something he shouldn't have been suspended for, and that cost us a series. But that's for a long conversation in a barbershop or something. All right, I think that wraps it up for today. We talked and touched on every series in the offseason and everything we probably shouldn't have, but great show, guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can check out the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, ogbasketball.com, and as I mentioned, we are airing on Dash Radio.
Peace. Oh, voice crack. Nice.